Good morning. Welcome to Tigers and Teddies Live. My name is Gary Robinson. You join me from Scotland. I was saying earlier from a rather dreich Arbroath. We're on the seaside coast, on the east coast of Scotland. But the sun is starting to come through. You notice how we do that? 10:30, we start Tigers and Teddies Live. And the sun shines. I think it's something to do with you, Suzanne. Good morning.
Good morning, Gary. It's lovely to see you in another bow tie.
Well, do you know what? I've worn this one especially, and this is the first outing for this one because I saw some Twitter activity before we started. And I've got to say hello to Heather Munro, but in particular, I've got to say hello to Lily, her daughter, who's been following us throughout the summer and is a big bow tie fan. And this is especially for you, Lily, this morning. So I'm wearing this especially for you. And I thought with a name like Munro, it had to be a tartan bow tie, didn't it, this morning?
Gary, Lily is not just into bow ties. She's into your bow ties. She thinks you are the man with the cool bow ties. So it's very personal for her.
Well, she's a lady of taste, quite clearly, you know. So there we go. So that's especially for you. So thank you for noticing that, Suzanne Zeedyk. It has been so good. It's been 2 weeks. I don't know how I have coped without you. How have the past 2 weeks been? I know I ask you the same question. First of all, how is? And I want to ask you about a photograph I saw on Twitter very briefly before we start from this week. But how's the past fortnight been for you?
I'm delighted that lockdown is ending. I found lockdown difficult. I have ventured out along with lots of people, and that photograph I think that you've noticed was me on my first train journey. And I actually realized I was a teeny bit nervous. So if that's the one you mean, Gary, with me
that's the one. Yep.
In my big hat, I decided to help with the nervousness that I would treat it like a holiday. I bought myself a new big hat out of the charity shop. And I climbed onto the train with big sunglasses on, entirely purposely to help me with the feeling of going back into public. And it made me think about all the other people who would be struggling with that transition. And it made me think a lot about childcare, because transition is a key part every day in childcare. And I tweeted it because I hoped it would help other people to not feel silly if they were feeling nervous, to think about, okay, how can I consciously deal with that? And then it turned it into a bit of a holiday that day on the train, which was not crowded at all. That was a bit shocking for me, how empty the trains were and how empty the car parks were. And I know that we are not yet back to normal life, whatever that is going to look like after lockdown. And in fact, I hope it will not look like it used to. I hope we're heading for a new normal.
Well, it was great to see the tweet, and I thought you looked very stylish in your in your holiday hat that you got from the charity shop, which was fantastic. I think it's great, absolutely wonderful. Today we're talking about early years after lockdown, and you know, you can say a lot about this series, but it's nothing but varied, I have to say. And this is a really important hour, and hopefully a very insightful hour. And we've got some wonderful people with us this morning. Pauline Scott, good morning. Pauline is the owner of Lullaby Lane Nurseries. Pauline, it is so good to see you. Do you know, I've got to also say that we do know each other, but I always ever get to see you maybe once a year. I don't know. We need to get together more often. But you're looking fantastic. How's lockdown been for you?
Well, firstly, Gary, thank you very much for all those compliments. It's lovely to see you too. I'm joining you from Glasgow this morning. Although my camera looks like it's nice and bright, it's not. It's streak out here in Glasgow too. Lockdown for me, Gary, has been a mixed set of emotions. There has been lots of uncertainty, which has made me nervous. There's been lots of decisions to make, which has brought fatigue at times. And actually, there's been lots of optimism. I've chosen to look at the opportunities that have come through the adversity that's within my own personal life and within our businesses at Lullaby Lane and at Tigers. So there's actually opportunity that has been created through being able to even take a step back and reflect on a lot of our practice and what we're doing within Lullaby Lane. So it's been very mixed for me, but I'm delighted to be here this morning. It's great to see you too.
I've been following your daily life, if you like, on Twitter, because I know you share, and there's some really good stuff. You really have been leading from the front, I have to say. How's that? I know we haven't started the interview properly here because I've got to introduce other guests, but I just want to ask, how's that been for you, as you know, for dealing with your personal life, but also, as I said, leading from the front? How have you found that balance?
Well, I started on the 23rd of March. I started putting out a tweet in the morning, and it was about, I called it COVID Connections. And I started to tag some people in, and I was doing some mindfulness sessions and putting out maybe some inspirational quotes, talking about the kit bag that I use to help me to connect with myself and with my family and with other people. And I was putting that out every morning. And actually it gathered a community of people who wanted to be part of that. And it wasn't necessarily what we were doing, it was more about the connection. And that really helped me, having that ritual every single morning, Gary, of knowing that there was going to be people there, even if I was feeling slightly isolated in my house, that there was other people out there and we were doing something together. So I had done that for 16 weeks actually, every morning, and we put something out. And actually some of the people I didn't know and I've made friends with over Twitter, a community has actually developed through it, and they've got to know each other, which I find absolutely wonderful. And the total benefits of social media. There can be lots of negatives, but that's one of the benefits.
We've just had a message from Claire McLaughlin, who says that your morning tweets have been fantastic. So thank you, Claire, for that feedback. That's really, really, well, it's fantastic. There you go, vindication. They're probably going to ask for you to bring them back, I would imagine, Pauline. But let's move on. Sharlene Davis. Sharlene, good morning to you. You're the manager of Lullaby Lane Nursery in Milngavie. Good to see you. Thank you for joining us this morning. Loving the Teddies, by the way. I've got to say, what are the names of your wee characters at the back? They're your sons, are they?
They are, yeah. The teddy bear is actually the very first teddy he got from his Auntie Donna when he was born, and the other one's his Tiger. So he said I could borrow them today for the purpose of this. I have to give them back. So they're here with me this morning.
Wonderful. And Sharlene, how's life in lockdown been for you?
Very much like Pauline had said there, just a sort of mix of emotions, just trying to find that balance between being a mum, working remotely for parts, then kind of just phasing back into the nursery routine as well. So it's just about working kind of together with everybody to try and create a balance, really. So it's had its ups, it's had its downs. Lots of kind of things have come out on the back of it, though, really positives, actually, some positives with regards to my personal life with my family, getting to spend more time with them. So there's things that I'll take forward, and there's things that I've definitely learned from during the time as well.
Brilliant. And we're also delighted to have parents online today, which is fantastic. Colm Mairi, hello, good morning to the both of you. Where are you joining us from this morning?
So we are joining from Strathblane, just outside Glasgow. Pretty dreich here as well.
Yeah, not any nicer.
A beautiful part of the world in which you live.
Oh, without a shadow of a doubt, it's a wonderful place. We're really looking forward to raising our daughter out here.
And that's Sullivan, your daughter, Sullivan. Yeah. She's 2 years old.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to say that she's with you, but is she engrossed in CBBS or something similar at the moment?
At the moment, but she may well come through.
We want to make sure we can get a word in edgeways, so you know.
we would love to see her. We would love to see her. So if she comes bursting in, just plant her right between the two of you, because she's an absolute cutie. So please bring her in. So we'll come back to you in just a second. Suzanne, what's the importance of this vodcast this morning in terms of early years after lockdown? How important is this discussion to people who are watching this and, of course, the wider world?
I think it's fundamentally important, Gary. I often say that alongside parents, the people who work in the earlier sector are the most important people in the world, and certainly in our country, because we're shaping the future. And I'm using strong language because I'm trying to get us to think about that and go, oh, has she overstated? What the science now tells us is that brains develop more quickly, especially in the first 3 years of life, than they ever will again. And that doesn't mean they stop developing. It means that they start to go through different stages of development. So brains start to do different things. They're not developing so rapidly. What you're doing in those early years is you're learning so much about how the world works, about how safe it is, about what it feels like to be with other people, whether people will come and help you when you're scared, when you're separated from your parents at what we call drop off. Will somebody help you with that sadness? Do they pay attention to that? All of that gets built into us biologically with neural pathways in the brain and the hormones that your body produces. That's going to make a difference for the rest of your life. And so I want us to think about that more deeply. I want us to think about what that means for policy and practice. And I want to tell the stories of lots of the organizations that are trying to think that through. And Lullaby Lane is one of those. They have tried really hard to embed attachment, the knowledge of that at the center of everything they do. And I think that story benefits other people.
Which takes us really nicely to Pauline. If you can pick up on that point, Pauline, tell me the story of Lullaby Lane and how you came. And I know that you use the phrase, and I think it's one that you use an awful lot, attachment led. So tell me a little bit about the story of Lullaby Lane and how the attachment led practice came about.
Hey Gary, attachment led is not how we opened the nursery. We opened the nursery in 2013, and I had never heard of attachment theory. And sometimes even when I say that, I feel quite embarrassed to say that. I feel quite nervous to say that, but I had never heard of attachment. I didn't understand early brain development, and we opened a nursery. And we opened a nursery because we have the training company, and one of the sectors that we delivered in was early years. And we took an opportunity to think about what a best practice nursery might look like. We opened the nursery, but what I was working from was my own gut instinct as a parent. And I had been a parent who had, my children went to nursery, and I had different experiences with both my children, positive and not so positive. And the positive experience was that for my daughter's experience, I knew that she was safe at nursery. I knew she was loved, and there was real affection from the staff. And my daughter was quite unwell as a child for the first 2.5 years of her life. And those women loved her. They cared for her. They came to visit her in hospital. That was a time in my life where it was very, very difficult, and I will never forget the support that I had from them. So when we opened up that nursery, I wanted it to be steeped in love and compassion, and that was just instinctively how I see children, how I was raised to see children. And for me, when we first used that word love, lots of people were saying to me, Pauline, that's just not acceptable. You can't use the word in early years. I said, why not? They said, because it's not professional. You can't love a child. This is work. This is profession. And I did know instinctively that actually children don't know that. Children do not know that we are professionals. Children do not know that anybody gets paid at Lullaby Lane. Children just respond to you in a relational position. And then about 15 months after we'd opened the nursery, I get introduced to Suzanne's work. And I contacted Suzanne and said, could you come to Lullaby Lane and can you deliver training with our team? And she said, that's really exciting to me. I've only ever been asked a handful of times to come and deliver training for a full nursery. And Suzanne introduced us to attachment theory. And as soon as she said that, I recognised that what we were trying to do instinctively for 15 months, there was a whole science behind it. And it made absolute sense. In that moment, I got frightened. I got scared. I started to think about how I had parented my own children. I thought about how I had been parented. I know I cried at that moment. And then as we started to work through it, I recognised I was only doing the best that I could at that time in my life with the knowledge that I have. And now that I have more knowledge, I have to do more with it. And I do believe that now knowing about the science of attachment, that we have a moral obligation. I have a moral obligation as an owner of a nursery to steep all of our practice and policies in attachment and understanding the experiences that our children have when their brains are growing at their most rapid. They will live with them for the rest of their life. They will take that into adolescence. They will take that into adulthood. So I have a moral responsibility to ensure that everything we do is steeped in that, and that is through our whole team, and that is with a partnership with our parents and sharing this information with our parents.
Because you talk about the practice being not childcare but family care.
Absolutely. And that's because there is an aim at Lullaby Lane for us to create a community. And if I take that back to my own experience as a parent, that was one of my loneliest times in life, when I became a mother for the first time. And I wasn't working with my instinct, I was working against it. There was other professionals telling me about my daughter and what to do. And I felt incompetent. I lost my confidence. I felt quite isolated. And I know for a lot of parents, because I spoke to lots of parents, that they can feel like that at that time. And what I would like us to do is probably take down the mask that a lot of us are wearing, where we are putting out on social media that life's wonderful and it's great, and then you get nervous because you think that mother over there, that father over there, they know how to do it all and I don't know how to do it all. I think if we can get to an openness and have conversation and share those feelings, that it creates a wider community that actually helps to regulate more of us and reduce those anxieties and regulate our bodies as the adults, which will inevitably help the children to feel more relaxed.
And Gary, can I come in just for a second to help frame this? We think of childcare as education in this country, right? So it fits within the education stream. It's not health, it's not criminal justice, it's not social work. We think of it as education. And as soon as you put a name on something, our human brains automatically start to think, okay, I know what kind of a thing that is. And if you think childcare is education, in our culture, we think, well, that must mean that you're helping to know how to do letters and numbers, and you're helping them do academic things. So the way that Pauline has just described family care is an interesting contrast with education. And so what we are talking about this morning, and in these wider discussion, is what should early care be? What is child care? What ethos and what theory do we need to help guide what we're doing? So when we talk about love, it can sound sweet to some people, but actually we're talking about fundamentally profound things about how we understand child development.
If I can go to Sharlene, Sharlene, for you as a manager of one of the nurseries, what's the experience been like for you, and what's it been like for the team?
Yeah, so before I came to Lullaby Lane, I, like Pauline, I'd worked in other nurseries and I had never heard of attachment theory. So when I became the manager and I came to Lullaby Lane, that was all new for me as well. So I did a bit of that, like, oh my goodness, like, if I've been doing it wrong all this time, I can't, that kind of idea. And I was questioning my own kind of professionalism, like, what have I done? Once I kind of got over that and did the training behind it, and I think that's key. The whole team are trained highly in attachment-led practice. Everything we do at Lullaby Lane is steeped in attachment. And the most important thing is that the adults in the nursery, the team know that, so they're then able to help the parents to understand and give them that shared knowledge. So that the team have the confidence and the parents have the confidence that when they leave their children, they're safe, they're happy, they're loved, and then the learner will follow. You can't have the learning without that. They've got to have that safe, that love, that connection. Once they feel that and they've got that safe place, they'll then go off and have those daring adventures and they'll learn. But they do have to start with the relationships and the connection first.
Suzanne, can I come back to you before I go to Colm and Mairi? Why does, because the word guilt has been used a few times, why does guilt come into this when people find out about attachment and then they reflect on their own, parenting styles? Why is guilt so prevalent sometimes in this?
Gary, it's a great question, and it's one of the reasons that I use the metaphor of saber-toothed tigers and teddy bears. Because the sweetness, the slight silliness of that helps us to get curious about something that is actually really threatening. And that is, what most people say to me when they come across this is, I didn't know that. I wish somebody told me that. No one told me that. When you realize something really fundamental about how important you are to your children and to other human beings, it's kind of like the world does a sliding door shift. You're like, if I had known that, I would have done other things. And and in my experience, you just spend a little while going, how do I feel about that? What do I think about that? What does that mean? And very often there are things you need to forgive yourself for. And traditionally, when we talk about attachment theory, we explain the science, the knowledge And there are debates about that science, but we focus on the knowledge rather than the feelings about the knowledge. So it's one thing to know this stuff. It's another thing to feel what it's like to know this stuff. And I think that that's one of the reasons that attachment theory has not had the impact on our society and our practice that it had the potential to, is because we didn't think about what it feels like to know this. And so once you can address that, you can talk about the feelings and you can give people permission to get curious and permission to feel guilty for a bit if that is where they go, then they don't have to feel ashamed about feeling guilty. Then you can walk through a process and you forgive yourself. And then you can step into helping your children with what you now realize you might have helped to create without meaning to. And a lot of the shame and blame goes, and I love that.
Colm Mairi, if I can come to you now, you had a fair bit of a journey before you arrived at Lullaby Lane. What prompted you to choose Lullaby Lane as the nursery for your beautiful daughter?
Mm-hmm. Probably led a bit by me, in as much as I work in the field of fostering and adoption, so I'm aware about kind of attachment and the importance of attachment-led practice. And so I was kind of really keen to get a nursery that I felt was going to look after our daughter as well, and that we would feel comfortable going to work and knowing, safe in the knowledge that our daughter was being really well looked after. And I kind of we went to several nurseries in different, in the area around about where we were working, things like that. And it was Lullaby Lane, absolutely, without a shadow of a doubt, the minute, and it was the last one we went to see, but the minute we went there, and I spoke to Sharlene, it was actually, and talked about it, I was just so excited. All the things he talked about, in terms of preparation for getting her ready for nursery, like the book and photos, so that she would have photos when she was there, like transitional objects, so that she had that security, and get to know the key worker, and the worker would come out and meet her in her own home. None of that was talked about any other nurseries in terms of even just preparing her for being ready to start nursery. And it just felt so right. And kind of spoke. I don't think you were able to come for the first bit, but came back and I was so excited speaking about it. And then we got Suzanne's book and things like that, and it just felt like it just made me feel so comfortable as a mum that Sylvan was. It was absolutely hands down, without a shadow of a doubt, the best place for her to be.
We've talked about, and prior to going on air as well, when we were having our pre-broadcast blether, if you like, we were talking about sometimes how parents can sometimes feel threatened by love and cuddles being supplied by somebody else and not necessarily them between 9 and 4 or whatever time it is that we're separated from children. Did that ever cross your mind at all? And if it hasn't, why do you think we are sometimes hesitant to embrace love and cuddles from other people for our children?
It was something that, funnily enough, some of my friends spoke about, because I spoke about how, I just want her to be scooped. If she falls over and hurts herself, I want someone to scoop her up and give her a big cuddle and a kiss and tell her it's good. Oh, that was really sore. Just the way I want somebody to replicate what I would do at home, so that she's got that kind of affection and care. So for me, I wanted somebody to love my daughter the way that, I love my daughter. I want people that are looking after her to show that same affection. So it didn't feel, I was really keen for that. I wanted that from the get-go, but
yeah, it wasn't something, I didn't have the same background knowledge as Mairi, but it was, again, but some of the visits to some of the other nurseries, they're all lovely, but they just didn't have that warmth that, that they would scoop up. And I know there's been, in society in general, there's been a pushback in schools and all that from contact, and it just feels utterly wrong. It's like that especially at that age, having that scoop up and cuddle is just, as Mairi says, that's what I want for children. I want that looked after. I want to look after in that way. So it was perfect from that point of view. I remember, I think it was the first time we went to see the two of us, and I was waiting outside for Mairi to join us, and I was in the kind of play area outside, and there's one of the workers with a child up in her jumper, just because she was having a hard time because it was the end of the day. So she was just scooched in there, cozy and warm, and it was just a wonderful thing to see.
Do we, staying with Colm Mairi, do we get attachment-led theory? Do we practice? Do we understand it? Do we get it? Do we embrace it? Do you think?
I don't think enough people know about it. I think lots of people don't know about it. I don't think it's standard. I remember having a conversation with my health visitor, and I was saying, like, I want somebody, and she said, I think they're all like that, and I am absolutely clear that they're not. They don't. It's not as well. It's like people say, it's not as widely known. People don't know about it. Lots of people don't know about it and don't really get it because they've not spent the time to think about it and the impact that it has. So no.
And I would say as well, I've heard about it or knew about it coming. I knew that it was attachment-led coming into it, but it's only in lockdown that I've really understood what it means.
Because we've been doing, Colm's been sitting in
webinars and things like that. And now, after that time, someone's been there, had a great care, and I just realised how good the care has been. It never really sank in until I think the second webinar I was on, a light bulb moment of that's what it means.
And do you talk to your circle of friends who may be in a similar situation with you? Who maybe have young children. Do you talk to them about your knowledge now of attachment-led practice? And if you do, what's their reaction?
Well, I haven't necessarily been talking about attachment-led, but I've been talking about what the nursery has done over lockdown, because that's the kind of these things that happen during lockdown. Don't they talk about these? And a lot of the other parents with kids at similar age are just surprised at the amount that's been done. And then comparing to what their nurseries have done, it's been a massive gulf, quite frankly, in some of them.
I probably do. I do a bit, because it's difficult because not everybody, some people don't necessarily want to hear it, others do. Some people are more open to it than others. I certainly always talk really positively about the impact it's had for Sylvan, so, and I'm happy to talk about it to everyone that wants to hear about it. So yeah, I suppose I do, in terms of how, like Colm said, how Sylvan experiences what we're experiencing, like how important that is for Sylvan, that she's remained connected with Lullaby Lane throughout this whole time, and that's definitely helped in her transition back without a shadow of a doubt, because she's been just with us at home over this lockdown. So having that connection with Lullaby Lane and seeing and the relationship still being live, because she sees them on, in the morning, the yoga, the stories being told by different workers that she knows, different people that Natalie, Lauren, all too many to name, but and then in Fern doing little videos to her, asking her how she's getting on, and then we'll do a wee video back so Sylvan can say what she's doing and missed you and all this kind of thing, and she talks about what she wants to talk about, and yeah, it's so important.
Gary, can I come in again? And I can see Pauline and Sharlene with lots of thoughts, but can I just frame again what we have heard? Here's another thing that makes it very difficult to talk about this. Colm and Mairi have just told us a really honest story about how they went to see other nurseries who weren't doing particular kinds of things. Or over lockdown, Lullaby Lane has done one thing and other parents have said their nursery wasn't doing that. Okay. People have feelings about that, right? So does that mean that talking about positive experiences of this family, do other nurseries feel angry that they're being compared? Do they feel embarrassed? How do we talk about what good practice looks like without criticizing other people, without blaming other people, but instead opening it to a place of curiosity, because everybody is doing their best. But if the funding isn't right, or the policy doesn't make it easy for you to give cuddles, or you're now worried about cuddling children because you're afraid they're going to catch COVID, or your manager thinks it doesn't look like you're doing very much, you've been cuddling that child for 2 hours and the dishes need done yet, right? So every time we talk about this stuff, it opens up all these feelings, and those feelings can shut us down from talking about it. So one of the challenges is, how do we talk about what is and isn't happening in the early years sector that keeps us curious rather than pisses people off? And I use that language purposefully because we don't say pisses people off out loud, but that is actually part of what happens. So the biggest question for me is, how do we keep people curious? Because if we can't stay curious, we don't serve our children. And in the 1950s, this conversation was all happening around hospitals, when parents weren't allowed to stay with their children in hospital and they had to go away and couldn't see them again for a week. And when attachment theory was brought to hospitals, people go, I'm not sure this is great for kids. I've got ideas about how we can make it better. Let's let the parents stay. There were lots of people in hospitals who went, how dare you tell us how to do our jobs? Are you saying that we don't provide good care for children? And it turned into big arguments for 2 decades. We're having the same kinds of conversations now. If we don't get this right in early years, we change our children in ways we hadn't anticipated and never meant to happen. And I can see Pauline's head going like this. That's why this matters. Pauline, do you want to pick up there?
I would like to, Suzanne, because I'd like to say I have nothing but respect for my colleagues that work in this sector. I think this is not an easy sector to work in by any manner of means. It is one of the most difficult jobs. I learned my apprenticeship on the floor, and I have nothing but respect for people who are working in the lives of children every single day. It is a really difficult job. And I have great colleagues out there in places like Curtin Home and Ace Place Nursery, Bonnie Broom, and I know some of them are joining us today, and we learn lots from their practice too. This isn't about saying that any nursery is better than anyone else. It's not about that. But what I do want to do is I want to share some of the practice that we have. So, for example, being part of this series, sharing our story in Suzanne's book, is not about, if we have that knowledge, I don't want to protect that. I want to share that. And if other people want to follow some of that, if other people want to adapt that for their nursery, then I'm really proud that that's something that we can do. And I think as a whole sector, we need to get better at sharing with each other and not being precious. And that brings me back to some of the knowledge about attachment, is that it's not widely shared with people. It's not widely shared with parents. It's not widely shared with early years staff and sector. Sometimes that academic knowledge, that scientific knowledge is held. And I know we heard that a couple of weeks ago with Jessica Taylor, that sometimes it is spoken in a language that people don't necessarily understand. And what helped me to understand attachment theory was the way in which Suzanne presents it, and the metaphor of saber-toothed tigers and teddy bears. And that metaphor is a language that we use throughout all of our business, all through the nursery, and our parents now use that language as well. That's a saber-toothed tiger moment. So we've been able to take the science, and it's been translated in a way that is not as scary as what we first thought. And I am watching primarily women, and I know we've got great men in the sector. I am watching people who have come into a sector where maybe in academia and education they were told they weren't that smart, they weren't that clever, they should go and work with children. I am watching people who are really understanding early brain development, science of attachment. They are undertaking things like behavioural analysis of children, and they never knew how smart they were. And I am so proud to see that. And that is one of the things that I want to see within this sector, is that it gets the recognition that it deserves, and that the people that work in it realise how important and how valuable they actually are. And that is one of my aims. And if telling our stories helps people to understand that, then I'm proud to be part of it.
Before I go to Sharlene, can I ask you a question as an owner? What challenges have you faced in terms of policy, in terms of rules and regulations, stuff that comes down from on top that says, nah, the cuddles, what? And I'm sure that you are mired in stuff around coming out of lockdown. I know you've been out of lockdown now since Monday, the children are back. But what sort of challenges have you faced, and actually have you overcome them? Because I'm sure you've had to back quite a few challenges back.
We have, Gary, because ultimately there is policy that comes out from people who might not work with children every single day. And theory is wonderful and policy is wonderful, but it doesn't always translate into practice. Even during COVID, we had this wonderful policy procedure of what life was going to look like when all of the children came back. And as the children started to come back on Monday, we have had to adapt that every single day, because once you bring children back into the mix, you actually work out, does it actually work in practice? And it's observing the children and listening to your team that helps you determine what practice should really look like. And I would like us, again, to work in a much more collaborative way with the regulators I don't want to have people coming in with a clipboard and telling us what we're not doing, because I think that's quite easy to do that. I want people to come in with a supportive approach to talk about how we can make improvements and highlight what we're doing well, and if we can work together. And yes, we want to keep our children safe, of course we do, but it doesn't always have to be steeped in fear that we're going to do some physical damage to our children. And if we don't follow policy that's made on high, then we're not a good enough nursery. And I think a lot of my colleagues in this sector would say to you that there is a fear around things like inspection. Even the word inspection is not a conducive word to feeling supported. And I would love if we could all get together and actually talk about that. Because if we really want it to be the best place for children to grow up, I think we've all got the same aim. So we should be working together and not against each other.
Well, it must have been music to your ears. Was it this week with the Early Years Minister, Mairi Todd, mentioned your practice, your nursery?
I think Mairi Todd is an ambassador of this sector and the people that work in it. And that is regardless of anybody's politics. But when I listen to her and she talks about words like love and nurture and fun and how the experiences now are going to shape children for years to come, I know that she understands this, and I do see a shift and a change. And we need to be confident in our beliefs, and we need to be confident in our ethos that when the challenges come, that we stand up for what we know is the right thing to do. And I think the more of us that are doing that together, that the confidence grows. And that's... Sorry.
No, so can I just come in? Because I just keep wanting to frame the importance of everything that we're hearing about practice this morning. So if early years in Scotland is beginning to really see this in a deeper way, so attachment is talked about more in policy documents. Mairi Todd just used the words love and fun in a ministerial speech. You know, there's some people who would think love and fun, where does that fit into education? So that in itself is radical. Okay, here's another debate that went on this week on social media. Lots of our children start school at 4. What happens if children are not developmentally, biologically ready to start school at 4, and our system doesn't engage with that reality easily? So there's a big debate that the deferrals that you are entitled to by the system because your child isn't ready to step into formal settings aren't being implemented in the way that many people think would benefit children. And so I just said this here so that people can think, okay, the love and cuddles that you get maybe in early years matters also for when you step into the formal education system. So if we don't weave this into the whole of our thinking about children, into all of the systems that deal with that, which includes formal education, then we miss the point. And we need to think more deeply. So we need local authorities to understand this alongside Mairi Todd. And I've just watched the chat here go blah as I said that. Okay, I'm trying to back up what Mairi and Colm said bravely. We don't get this, and we need to get more curious.
Sharlene, if I could come to you, the children have been back since Monday, and you've changed practice on a daily basis, as Pauline was saying. What have you learnt over the past 5 days? What insights can you give us?
So for us in the nursery coming back, as Pauline said, things can look good in theory. It's not until you're in and the children come back. So prior to that, actually, we'd had our team back. So we had returned the team and phased them back and did a lot of connection time with the team so that they felt ready for it. Because as we've said at many occasions, you've got to start with the adults because it's in the life of the children. So we started there with our team. We did connection time with the team who were in the nursery by themselves, having discussions on how they felt, how they were feeling about returning to the nursery, the children coming back, and looked at what we could put in place for them before we got the children back. So we did some yoga, mindfulness sessions, things that we do with the children, we do with our team. So the attachment starts there. It starts with the team and then it filters down to the children and the families. So after we had did the connection time with our team, we then invited the parents back for some stay and play sessions with their children and with their key person. So it was a phased return. So prior to Monday, we'd had the children in the nursery on one-on-one sessions with their key person and their family to get that connection again. So when we came in on Monday and the children all returned, we thought, okay, great, we've been doing the same play sessions. This will all go well, they'll come in and it'll all go to plan. That wasn't the case, of course, because it's early years. But we sat down and we have done on a day-to-day basis, like, okay, what went well? What can we do going forward? Where were the challenges in that? And I think, like Pauline said, it has to be fluid like that. You can have a plan in theory. It's not always going to work out. We all know working with children as well. It just depends when they come in, and that's where the attachment is so important. Because if a child does come in and that separation in the morning isn't a good separation, it can then affect them for the rest of the day. And we know that, our team at Lullaby Lane know that, because they're also knowledgeable on the brain development. We know what's going on in their bodies and their brains at that time. So for us, the key thing was to make sure they felt safe, they felt relaxed, and the parents felt they could go away knowing that their child was going to be safe and loved that day. So it's still ongoing, we'll still keep going with it. But every day this week, we've had a huddle at the end of the night to have those discussions, and the team have very much been involved with that. They're the ones on the floor with the children, and we've been speaking to the parents on a one-to-one kind of basis as well, and between drop-offs and pick-ups and things like that as well. So yeah, it's an ongoing thing, but I'd like to think that every day brings with it new kind of things, and we move on, and the next day we're able to then add things that are going to support the children and support the families.
Colm and Mairi, well, just referring to what Pauline has said earlier, and Sharlene, is that they're building a community, and it's about family care and not just children care, but very much about family care. And part of that is evening sessions that they hold, which is quite unique, I believe. How's that helped you as a family? And actually, what have the sessions been about?
So, the sessions, I missed one or two of them, but the sessions are basically, they've been around a lot of stuff in this book. And yeah, around attachment theory. It's weird, I suddenly can't remember all the details, but it's just, well,
no, I think it's just the light bulb. I get this light bulb moment, certainly for Colm kind of as well, because obviously I've joined into like everyone, I think, and it's, but for Colm in particular, I'll see, oh my goodness, that, and I see differences in the way, I suppose, we do things, like Colm's saying about recognising like what's a good sort of separation, looking at the little sort of non-verbal feedback you see when we do the wee videos between the children and, you know, and parents, look at the kind of connection and all that kind of stuff. And it's just really good as parents to get the chance, like when she's asleep as well, it works really well. She's in bed, we can sit and focus on this. And it's been really helpful actually in terms of our parenting.
Before COVID, I had never done any of the drop-offs. Just because of the way our work last. So having that experience of the video and seeing what it means, that was when it really started to sink in for me. Seeing what's going on there. And then I was then able to take that on Monday, bringing it into nursery. And take one little clip, one little session that I could then take into practice. When I was bringing it in for the drop-off, it was a massive light bulb moment to really understand what's going on, what's happening to Sylvan, and what's happening to me, and what was happening to Mairi previously as well. And this is a light bulb moment here now. I wasn't really, as a family, I wasn't really being as supportive, because I wasn't aware of what Mairi was feeling when she was dropping Sylvan off properly, because I wasn't doing it, I wasn't seeing it. So in that respect, it's helped there, because I appreciate more what Mairi's been doing and what it's been feeling for her.
Gary, can I come in there? Here's what's amazing about the story that Mairi and Colm just shared. Colm just said, I didn't know that. But he didn't say it in a way where he's blaming himself or shaming himself. He's able to step into that with confidence and go, I didn't know that. Right? There is no such thing as a perfect parent. We live in a time where parents have all this pressure to be perfect, and then all the childcare settings are all this pressure to be perfect, and all that drive for perfection makes people nervous. They think they get it wrong. It makes them anxious. The children pick up on the anxiety, and now you've got whole, ways of development going on that nobody intended. So the tone that we just heard Mairi and Colm share their story in is one that I would like for all parents, for all childcare settings, to just be able to go, I didn't know that. What would that mean? And we could do it with curiosity rather than the blame and guilt and shame that so often is common these days.
There's a great quote from Colm, empowering and terrifying to know this stuff. And it's been tweeted. It's been tweeted around the world. Empowering and terrifying, all in one. I mean, although empowering and terrifying, extremely beneficial, I imagine.
Oh, without a shadow of a doubt.
Yeah, it peppers everything we do. It kind of, and every kind of managing transitions and in everyday life, in nursery and out. I mean, it's like has a knock-on effect in family life as well. It's great.
Charlene, in your experience, do you tend to find that men get particularly anxious about everything that we're talking about? You know, dropping off children, childcare, cuddles, because it's not particularly masculine, it's not very butch. Do you tend to find that men find this stuff a little bit more difficult than women?
I think from the experience at the nursery, I would say yes, particularly as Colm said, during those separation times and reconnection, you can get a sense that if dad is picking during those moments in the day that they're a bit more anxious. We find it difficult to kind of make that eye contact and have those conversations that might come more naturally to mum if she's doing them. So yeah, I think so. I think with nursery though, because we've got that knowledge, we're able to kind of try and just drip feed that in there. So actually the families that have been with us for a while get to those moments that Colm's just described there, and they have those wee moments and they're like, all right, okay. That makes sense, and then they start to do wee things and pick it up. So over time, yeah, they come around and they kind of start to kind of be a bit more curious. But I think that's because the team give them the confidence to do that, just by kind of drip feeding that information out to them. But initially, I would say, yeah, they do find it a wee bit more anxious than mums do talking about it.
Pauline, one of the things I find incredibly frustrating, and it must be off the scale for you, is about how attachment-led practice and what you've learnt about it isn't widely known. It's not talked about enough. It's not out there. Now, apart from the great work that Suzanne does and this type of interaction and communication, what else can we do you think, to spread the word about the work that's being done and how beneficial it is?
I think, and I'm seeing, Gary, from even the chat, that there's lots of people saying that they've been in education, they've been in early years, and they were never taught this, at any time through their training and development. And one of the things, and I think our colleague Liz had said that earlier on in the chat, is that this should be mandatory in qualifications. Yeah. So anybody who is coming into this sector, it should be a mandatory element of the qualification delivery. And anybody who has been in the sector for a period of time, that should be mandatory, that they should all have to undertake that, just the same way that you would have to undertake a first aid course or a manual handling course, any legal training. This, for me, is even more important. So I think we have to make it mandatory within our qualifications. And if I can just pick up on what we're talking about in terms of our investment into that, we have committed to a years-long programme with Suzanne called Daring Ventures, and every single member of our team has undertaken 7 sessions of training with Suzanne, because for me, attachment theory and really understanding it, to really gain the knowledge of knowing how you would take that theory and put it into practice, you cannot gain that in a half-day session. You cannot gain that in a one-day workshop. It is an ongoing development. I have been learning about this now since 2015, and I am still sitting in sessions where I still go, okay, I didn't know that. I didn't understand that. Okay, now I've got an opportunity that we can make change. So it's continuous learning. So I don't think it's a tick box of you go to a day's session or one of the members of the team go and they cascade it back to everybody else. So we've committed to this programme, and I think it's going to go after a year. I think we might go into our 2nd year. And then one of the things that we wanted to do with that is, if our team have that knowledge and confidence, how do we create a wee mini Daring Ventures series for our parents? And that's what we did throughout lockdown, is we had this little series that we called Taming the Tiger, and it was delivered in the evenings over Zoom, which actually suited lots of our families, which is why Colm was able to come, and we've actually got more dads than we've ever had able to join, and we've got parents sitting on their sofa at night time listening to the science of attachment, watching these videos and seeing it. And I love it because we watch the parents looking at each other and they're laughing at each other. They're understanding their own attachment style.
Yeah.
You know, and there's those light bulb moments, and it's an absolute joy to watch parents sharing in that and recognizing, okay, I do that, we do that as a couple. So that, for me, has been a commitment, and I think it has been a real investment for the nursery, and one that I think is money well spent, because we will get the return on that. We will get the return on that for our children. We will get the return on that for the confidence of our team and our parents. And knowledge is a great thing. Lots of people do not understand the abilities that they have, and I think learning more and more about this gives people the knowledge to know that actually they can meet their child's needs.
And can I just say there, Pauline, having gone from those webinars and hearing that there, and then going in where we did the settling in hours, there was a chance that I had then to, when it was just Sylvan was in by herself, so it was me, Sylvan and Lauren and chatting, and we actually talked about those webinars and some of the stuff, and Lauren shared some of the things from the training days. And it just, you know, you're talking about the community you're trying to build, it's that kind of conversation. I would never have had that conversation with Lauren or any of the other workers without having been on that webinar. Also without having that chance to sit down, the three of us, for that hour as well. So, you know, that was part of it. But no, I would never have had that. And it's just builds even further that confidence, and that human connection.
So Gary, what you are hearing, what I think we are hearing, is that this is not rocket science, right? We've had attachment theory since the 1940s, and yet a lot of people don't get it. We're using the word attachment this morning. Other people play in the same area when we use the language of relationships or nurture or trauma or ACEs, adverse childhood experiences. But once you name an area something, people can think, well, if it's attachment, it's not nurture, and that's not trauma. All of this is the same, you know, domain, the same area. So we can get curious about what do we call it, and is that stopping us from understanding it, or is it our feelings and our anxieties that are stopping us from understanding it? Or is it because we thought it was about academic knowledge that it's stopping us from understanding? What is stopping us from getting this stuff that I think everyone deserves to know, and that people want to know if you make it accessible to them? So that is one of the key questions that comes out of this for me, is what stops us from knowing it, and what do we need to do to shift that into more curiosity?
Could I come in there, Suzanne? And just from my own perspective, I did not think that the experiences that children had before you could recall it had any significance in what happened for the rest of their life. So I can only recall from being 5 years old. I do not remember anything else that happened before that. So for me as an adult, I did not realize the significance of all of those earliest experiences, but they are built into my body, and that is what the science has taught me. That is what this knowledge has taught me, that is built into my body, and my body has a physical reaction for events that might replicate something that happened in those earliest years, and I don't even know what it is. One of the most explicit things I'll very quickly say is I am terrified of cats. I am terrified of cats, and my body has a physical reaction to seeing a cat, i.e. I go into fight or flight mode. I have to run away from it, I freeze, I stop. That must have happened to me before I can even recall when it happened to me, but my body has held that for all of those years. And that can happen for our children in nursery, and if we're not steeped in attachment or understanding of that, then actually if they come to nursery, we could be part of creating some of those fears that in 20 years' time their body might still hold it.
My final question now, because we're heading into the home straight now, so I want to be relatively brief. Colm and Mairi, thank you so much for your insights this morning. They've been incredibly powerful. I just want to ask you about this, because you have flashed it every now and again, and it's how this series started. Suzanne's book, Saber-toothed Tigers and Teddy Bears: The Connected Baby Guide to Attachment. Briefly, how has this helped you?
I was reading through some of this last night, just to help me go back through the webinars, and it's like a really good reference point to come back to for me. Just again, because we talked about some of the stuff, I can't remember. We talked about stuff anyway, and there was examples on there, and I went back and read the book, and it was that's terrible. I'm shocking. I apologise for being just how chaotic, normal. The other two. Attachment styles, that's the one. Sorry, insecure, and just going back, going back and looking at them again and reading it differently, it helped sink that in a bit better. Obviously, not afraid of the words. I didn't work. It made me think more about myself, and that was the bit that was terrifying, I think, on the webinars. And in reading it in the book today, a few weeks later, it's like, this just makes sense.
It's very readable, and it's a book you can dip in and dip out of. It definitely is. It's lovely to be able to go through it and just see what you're doing well and the things that you can change and the things and just the impact of it all. Because we all want parents, we all want to get it right for our child. We want to get it right for our kids, as best we possibly can. And so we're really open to learning and and getting support to do that, because I want my daughter to have a positive experience of nursery and moving on, because I know that's going to have a huge impact, and I want her to have good relationships with people, and I want us to be able to help her to do that. So,
Charlie, my final question for you, and then one more for Pauline. There'll be other nursery managers, I'm sure, on this vodcast this morning, and people who will see the recorded version later this week. What is one thing you would say to them if they're not immersed or involved with attachment-led practice? What would you say to them to encourage them to at least consider looking into it?
I think just to go into it with an open mind, just be curious. There's no judgment. This stuff's there to help us understand, as Mari said, to make sure the children are getting the best and they're getting the opportunity to reach their potential. And if we can start there and just start with being a bit curious, it then gives that space for them just to learn a little bit more knowledge, to then be able to pass that on to one of their team, and then just to be open about it though, and just to say, right, okay, let's have a look at it. Be curious. What can we do? What can we do as a setting? Because all settings are very different, and that's why the shared practice is so important. The early year sector as a whole, like just sharing practice, you can take wee bits from here and there. It's not one size fits all. So I would just say be curious and just take it at your own pace. There's no judgment in it, and just get as much knowledge as you can, because I think it's so beneficial.
And Pauline, last word to you. One recommendation for early years policy. What would it be from your point of view? What would you recommend? How would you want to shape this?
That children do not learn from people that they do not love. You cannot influence a child if you don't have their heart, if they do not feel emotionally safe and secure. So if we want our children to thrive and we want them to learn and we want them to develop their potential, then they need to feel emotionally safe and emotionally secure. And there's lots of great practice of that happening out in education. There's lots of our colleagues that Suzanne highlights that are doing that. But we need to steep all of our learning in understanding the importance of relationships and serving those attachment needs, looking at the feelings and not the behaviour.
Can I just go back to Colm and Mairi very briefly, because I'd like the star of the show to be Sylvan. Is she in the room with you?
Well, we're trying to coax her into it.
I would just love to see her, because Sylvan is everything that this conversation has been about. Just while you're doing that,
we're incoming. We're incoming.
Oh, here we go. Here we go.
This is called a transition.
Hey!
So
bye-bye.
Oh, bye-bye.
Hi, Sylvan.
Bye.
So Suzanne, another wonderful hour, just over a wonderful hour, and thank you so much. Just a reminder that the book is out and it's available on all sorts of formats, of course. And we've all got our teddies here. I've got my demo, got ours. Yeah, we've got ours. We're back in 2 weeks, aren't we, Suzanne? What are we talking about in 2 weeks?
We're talking about criminal justice and about how a criminal justice system could be transformed as well if we understand attachment theory and trauma.
Wonderful. Well, from Sharlene, from Pauline, from Colin and Mary and Sylvan, and from Susanna and from me, have a super couple of weeks until we speak again, Saturday morning in 2 weeks, and take care.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Bye,
Gary.
everybody.
Thank you, Gary.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, team.